This video is the first episode of the second portion of the Explorer Note readings. Today we begin the story of Scorched Earth as told through its survivors. Once again, I am very thankful to have you here, and enjoy Survivor. Confound those confused contraptions! Despite my best efforts, I could make neither heads nor tails of the mysterious machine that brought me here. If only I still had that jittery, bespectacled assistant of mine from all those years ago. What was his name? Gerund. The one that loved tinkering with the devices we'd salvaged from the arms of the island's less fortunate inhabitants. Good lad. The inscriptions he found on the inside of those little trinkets were where I first saw the word ARK, as I recall. Shame about the incident with the Compsognathus. If I still had his services, perhaps I'd never be in this godforsaken desert. Ah well, stiff upper lip, Rockwell. Make the best of it. Right then. Now that I have found a shady spot where I can enjoy a brief respite from this desert's dreadful heat, it's high time that I set some goals for this expedition. If I wander about aimlessly, then I'm sure to meet the same fate as poor Gerald. First, I shall find a local tribe, if for no other reason than to obtain a proper mount and supplies. Second, I simply must learn more about that strange metal that lined the walls of the sanctuary. Even with a cursory study, I could tell that it possesses wondrous properties. But where could I find more of it? I must say, nothing reminds a man of his own mortality quite like a desolate wasteland. As a strapping young lad, I could have survived alone in this desert for years. Why, on one occasion, I fought off a Bengal tiger with naught but an empty flask and my favorite pipe. With this makeshift spear, the beasts of this land would never have a prayer. Yet, in my old age, I can feel this damnable sun snapping my strength with every minute I spend under its unforgiving gaze. Each day I cover less ground than the day before. I must find civilization soon, no matter how primitive. Without the right tools and supplies, I fear that this expedition will be incredibly short-lived. Eureka! At last I have found signs of human life. This afternoon I came across a fresh series of footprints, some from humans and some from what I assume are large beasts of burden. I cannot be sure who made them or how civilized they may be, but neither can I afford to be too particular in my choice of saviors. Whoever they are, I must track them down immediately. As soon as I gather my strength, I shall pursue my quarry with the utmost haste and vigor. The tale of the brilliant and impeccably groomed Sir Edmund Rockwell shall not end this day. Salvation, thy name is Prophet's Rest. After a proper meal and some time out of the sun, the makeshift fortress doesn't look half as grand as its name might imply. Yet, when I first sighted its walls from across the dunes, it may as well have been El Dorado itself. So grateful was I to find it. Thus far, I have seen little of the inhabitants, but they seem a hospitable sort. I've been given food, shelter, and even a wet cloth to clean myself with. Quite generous of them, considering how scarce water is in these lands. Their clothing is a curiosity, however. Those robes seem more ceremonial than functional. It seems that Prophet's Rest is less a fortress and more an enclave or monastery. I suppose that would explain the name, now, wouldn't it? Yes, as strange as it may sound, the natives have created a primitive religion centered around the Ark's obelisks. They pray 3 times a day, each time facing a different obelisk, and their robes bear a unique symbol, a 3-pointed star colored red, green, and blue. The blue obelisk appears to receive particular reverence due to its proximity. As charmingly ignorant as their superstitions may be, it's far from the most savage religion I've encountered. Besides, Prophet's Rest is in need of a doctor, and I am in need of supplies. I've discovered why Prophet's Rest is so generous with their water. The well at the edge of the compound is built directly on top of what the locals call a water vein. An endless supply of water bubbles up from beneath the earth. Its existence is a minor miracle, though compared to what I saw in the starlit sanctuary, minor is the operative word. I suppose this Ark must be floating among the stars just as the island was. What an extraordinary thought. I cannot fathom how such a thing is possible, but that remarkable metal must be the heart of it, I am certain. Most of my work as the monastery's doctor has been trivial. Every now and then one of the guards gets injured by the local wildlife, but I usually find myself treating heat stroke and common illness. As such, I have had plenty of time to learn all the priests know about the obelisks. All told, they are stunningly ill-informed about the literal pillars of their faith. They are unaware that the obelisks are actually devices that can be activated, and needless to say, they have never activated one themselves. They showed a flicker of understanding when I described the artifacts I found on the island, however. I shall have to keep digging. Unbelievable. Have these idol-worshipping ninnies replaced all their common sense with blind devotion? Have years of oppressive heat completely addled their brains? I was finally allowed to see the monastery's inner sanctum, and lo and behold, there they were, sitting upon an altar before a flock of protesting primitives with these glowing artifacts, just like the ones I had found in the caverns beneath the island. Yet instead of making use of them or even studying them, these half-wits are praying to them. The true value of those artifacts is completely lost on these simpletons. Sacred relics indeed. It took time, but I finally pilfered enough supplies and tools to survive on my own. Loading them onto these camel-like beasts of burden was laborious, but the real trial was absconding with the artifacts. There was always someone watching the inner sanctum, so I carefully studied the guards' shifts until I identified whose drink I had to spoil with my knockout serum. Even then, I acted with great haste and guile, for my heist will surely be discovered when the priests convene for their morning prayers. Alas, they will be too late. Sir Edmund Rockwell is always ahead of his foes, but not by a mere step. No, I am miles and miles beyond their reach. It has been several days since I left the Prophet's Rest, and I have seen no sign of pursuit. I am unsurprised. They probably assumed that I would make for the blue obelisk, as it was nearest. By setting out for the green obelisk instead, I already outwitted those simple-minded zealots. As I said, miles ahead. Miles! With those fools out of the way, I can slow my pace, and take some time to properly study these so-called sacred relics of theirs. I am curious to see if the materials they are made of bear any similarity to the metal in the Starlit Sanctuary. The obelisk is reacting to the presence of the artifacts with even more intensity than I expected. Each obelisk on the island requires 8 artifacts to generate that sort of response, not 3. In other words, I may not need to do any spelunking before summoning whatever terrifying beast this ARK has in store for me. Ah, the beast. Now that poses an entirely different conundrum. Even with my youth and my favorite pipe, I doubt that I could slay a monster such as that the dragon Mr. Nerva fought. Not alone, anyway. I shall need to find a partner for this venture. But who? I've turned back north in hope of making contact with some of the natives. It is a risk, as I cannot be sure how many bumbling savages are under the sway of that ludicrous obelisk-worshipping cult, but it is also the only region that I definitely know is occupied. I do not have much to offer in exchange for their aid, but I am sure that I can negotiate an alliance with at least one of this ARK's tribes. I was at the center of the island's diplomatic disputes for years, after all. Why, I am a seasoned silver-tongued negotiator. Surely I can coax a partnership out of these primitive desert dwellers. What terrible misfortune. My keen sense of direction finally led me to a local settlement, but as it happened, I was not the first party to visit it that day. That honor belonged to the Burning Phoenix clan, a band of raiders that were plundering its storehouses and enslaving its surviving residents as I arrived. Naturally, the hoodlums fell upon me and stripped me of my valuables within minutes of my arrival. Ruffians! I managed to keep hold of my journal, but little else. This won't do, not at all! Then again, I was seeking out a tribe skilled in the art of violence. Perhaps I can turn this to my advantage. Curse these stubborn brutes! Despite a litany of polite gentlemanly requests, they refuse to allow me to parley with their leader. Surely any leader of men is not half the imbecile that these barbarians are. I am positive that we would come to some sort of... Damn this noise! It is impossible to concentrate with all this insufferable whining. Half these prisoners won't stop moaning about one injury or another, and the other half are in constant hysterics. Very well, perhaps if I tend to some of the wounded, it will dim this distracting cacophony.